USA, USA, USA. Okay guys, tonight we're going to look at how the Enlightenment helped to cause the American Revolution. So, before the United States was the United States of America, there were 13 American colonies that the British owned / controlled. And these were New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. So there has to be some type of cause and effect relationship here in terms of why the American Revolution took place. The first thing is that these colonies that the British owned, it's expensive to own colonies. You have to provide a lot of things. Even more expensive than that is war. Now the war that I'm talking about is called the 7 Years' War, and this is a mega war fought in 3 different places all around the globe between England and France, and they also have some allies thrown in for good measure. As I said, the fighting will take place in Europe, in India, where both England and France are fighting for more ports and more money and more trade, and then also in North America. In the United States, most people call the 7 Years' War the French and Indian War because that's who the English were fighting, the French and the Indians. If you look at this map, you can see in the pink color everywhere where the British had land before the war. Okay, purple areas as well. The blue is the territory that France owned. Okay, and most of this is Canada, and then further down into what is now the central part of the United States. Most of that blue territory will be lost by France and gained by England. You can see in this after map just how much territory the English won by winning the 7 Years' War. Really everything that is red or pink is now English territory. So that's land in what is now the United States of America, as well as further north, what is Canada. So this is why Canada has 2 official languages today, English and French. It used to be a French colony, and then it became an English colony. Now the good news for England in this is that they won land, and thus they will win money because they have more items to trade, they have more places where they can go to trade. So this is a great victory for them. Now the bad is that this is a very long and costly war, plus you're fighting in 3 different locations around the earth. So this will be a very expensive war. And as England doesn't want to pay for it themselves, they ask the colonists to pay for it. The British basically say, we fought for you, so now you have to pay us back. This was very ugly for the American colonists because for the last 7 years, they have been basically ruling themselves without England's help. So they've basically been free for the last 7 years, and now all of a sudden they've lost this freedom, and they've been told they have to pay more money. And the thing about paying money in taxes is that when you pay more taxes, you expect more services in return. So if you're paying more taxes and not getting anything in return, it doesn't seem like a fair deal. The way that England imposed the taxes was through a variety of ways, but most commonly it was on things that everybody bought all the time. An example of this would be on stamps. Now, stamps are used to mail letters, but they're also used to make any type of document legal. So if you got married, you needed a marriage certificate. Or if you inherited money from a family member who had died, you needed a death certificate. Newspapers had to have stamps on them. So any type of document at all had to be stamped, so you had to pay an extra tax. You'd also have to pay extra money for things like sugar and tea. So really, everyday items are being taxed, so everyone is feeling the brunt of this. The famous saying during this time is no taxation without representation, meaning the colonists would be okay with paying more taxes if they got something in return. What they wanted was to be represented in Parliament. English citizens back in England paid taxes, and then their part of England was represented. And not surprisingly, the English did not give in, which led to a major event on a cold, dark night on December 16th, 1773. That's right, folks. The Boston Tea Party. As you can see right here, colonists dressed up like Native Americans, and they destroyed about $1 million in today's money of tea on a British East India ship. Now, obviously, the English are very, very upset, and so they get revenge on the colonists, first by closing the port of Boston, which is a major port. That's a lot of businesses, a lot of jobs that you are now taking away from people. Then they revoke the Massachusetts Charter, meaning they take away its colony status and make it a royal colony. So as an example, if you wanted to hold a town meeting, you had to have the governor's permission. The governor is appointed by the king, and so the governor will say no. So now it's basically like a military state. And speaking of military, there's something called the Quartering Act. So English soldiers were forced to live with people who lived in Massachusetts. So literally you didn't have a chance to say no if the English soldier knocked on your door and said, "I want to spend the night." Now, all of this started to change really in the Enlightenment era. So there's this British writer called Thomas Paine, and he writes a short book. It's called a pamphlet, and it's called Common Sense. It's written in very basic English, and it's not very long, so it's very easy to read and it's very cheap. And basically, it contains a lot of Enlightenment ideas saying, why would you continue to put up with this when the government is behaving badly? So it's common sense that you would seek your independence. And that's just what the Americans do. The colonists will vote at 2 continental congresses to become independent, okay? The Second Continental Congress is in 1776, and during this time, on the 4th of July, they proclaimed the Declaration of Independence. Now, remember this painting, because tomorrow I'll tell you why it is fake. So this is the Declaration of Independence that was passed by the Second Continental Congress, and it told England that the American colonists are seeking independence. So these are the main ideas for why. And one of the areas that's the most important lines of this entire document is on the left. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Where do you hear Enlightenment ideas in that statement? The architect of the Declaration of Independence was Thomas Jefferson. You see him in the $2 bill right here. Look at the back of the $2 bill. What do you have? That's right, the Declaration of Independence. Fun fact, the $2 bill is a legal note in the United States. They haven't printed it for a very long time. You still see them from time to time, but it is very rare. The American colonists will select General George Washington, a veteran of the 7 Years' War, to lead them against the heavily favored British redcoats. You may know Washington a little better from seeing him on the One. 100 times more important than that is Benjamin Franklin. Haha, JK, LOL. But seriously, Franklin was this very sort of elder statesman. He was this advisor who had done everything. He had started his own printing press. He had helped to discover how electricity works. So he was sort of a jack of all trades, and he's also a diplomat, and he helps to craft the Declaration of Independence and give advice. For the most of the war, he will live in Paris as the ambassador to France. This is important because France, in the end, will help the American colonists fight against the British to become free. Next year, you will study this event in great detail. I'm just giving you the highlights. By 1781, the American colonists eventually wore down the British redcoats. The advantages that the American colonists had is that they were fighting at home and that they had something to fight for, their freedom. By 1783, in the Treaty of Paris, the United States of America was proclaimed as an independent nation. And as a result, the first government that the United States of America formed was a failure. It was more of a republic called the Articles of Confederation, and it gave no central power to an executive branch. So just like the Dutch system maybe has some flaws, the American system did as well. It will be replaced 6 years later in what's called the United States Constitution, which creates a new form of government. This new government will split up and separate the power so that one group does not become too powerful. You have an executive branch where the president will be. You have a legislative branch, which is where Congress will meet. And then lastly, you have a judicial branch where the Supreme Court will meet. So they are all sharing power. And one of the things that was passed with the Constitution was something called the Bill of Rights, to guarantee that the president did not become like a king and become too powerful. And as you see right here, there are a lot of things that are really important that are still followed today, such as freedom of press, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, the right to bear arms, the right to refuse quartering of soldiers, the right to have a search warrant for arrest, the right to have a free trial, the right to have jury cases for trials. So basically, these are people's rights that have to be followed. So all in all, why can we say that the United States is a product of the Enlightenment? Good night.